There we go. She's a vet tech.
Well, once again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome aboard the Three Rivers Queen. Now we have just departed our Station Square dock, which is all along our right-hand side over here, and it is the home to our entire Gateway Clipper fleet. We are proudly celebrating our 63rd season here aboard these Three Rivers. We got our start back in 1958 by a man named John Connolly, who, along with his nephew, Captain Jack Gessling, had gone to Lake Erie and purchased a small fishing vessel named the Bridget Ann. They brought that boat back down here to Pittsburgh, sailing it day and night for 2.5 weeks, and encompassed over 2,200 miles just to reach the city. They arrived here in Pittsburgh on May 16, 1958, changed the name of the Gateway Clipper, and sailed on its very first cruise the following day. In our first 4 months of service, we accommodated 25,000 passengers. The next year, they went out, bought 2 more boats, and the Gateway Clipper fleet was born. Over the course of our 63 years here, there have been many boats that have called the Gateway Clipper fleet home. However, we do currently run a 5-vessel operation, and we can accommodate up to 1,700 passengers at one time, making us one of the largest inland waterway fleets in the entire United States. Well, at this time, I'm going to turn things over to our narrator for this cruise. His name is Alex. He's going to speak to you from right up here on the 3rd deck from right behind the pilot house.
No, never.
Take it away, Alex.
Thank you, Captain, and thank you, everybody, for coming out to join us this evening. We have a lot to cover in our sightseeing tour, so let's get started. On the right, you will see Station Square Center, at one point a thriving railroad station, hence the name. Today it is home to a number of excellent restaurants such as Joe's Crab Shack, Buca de Beppo, and Texas State Brazil. The building at the far left end has a billboard with the letters P and L-E-R-R at the top, which stands for Pittsburgh and Lake Erie Railroad. That was the original terminal building back in the day. Today it is home to the Grand Concourse Restaurant and Dandy Dancer Saloon, or you can just go in to see the beautiful stained glass ceilings which were covered up in World War II and later restored. The tracks you see running up the side of Mount Washington are part of the Monongahela Incline, and I'll be telling you a little bit more about the history of the inclines toward the end of our tour tonight. In the meantime, we are about to pass underneath the Smithfield Street Bridge, the oldest bridge in Pittsburgh at 140 years of age. In the 1990s, it was designated as a historic landmark of the city and restored to its original colors, which you see now, brown, blue, and gold. That is unusual because you might have noticed that all the other bridges downtown are painted bright yellow. City law says they have to be painted that way to reflect Pittsburgh's golden triangle, the downtown financial district. With an obvious exception, of course, for historic landmarks. A little further up the river, you'll see a rail bridge crossing the Monongahela. That is the T Bridge, so named because it provides a route for our light rail system, the T. How imaginative. The T is free to ride downtown, by the way, so if you would like to take in the sights of the Golden Triangle up close without hunting for ever more expensive parking spaces, you have a friendly alternative. Past the T-Bridge, you'll see Pittsburgh's only true suspension bridge, the 10th Street Bridge. As the story goes, it was designed by the same engineer who created the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. He wasn't sure that his design would be successful, however, so he tested it out on a smaller scale here in Pittsburgh. I guess by definition, that makes us the guinea pigs in the equation. I'm choosing not to be offended by that. I cannot confirm or deny the truth of this story, but it does make for a nice yarn all the same.
What's he talking about?
I don't know, I'm waiting for him to tell a joke.
Yeah, me too.
As we get turned around, we see in front of us our first look at Pittsburgh's famous city skyline, and I'd like to direct everyone's attention in particular to a tan brick building with the name Huntington at the top. That is the Grant Building, a U.S. Coast Guard certified lighthouse, and not just for boats either. The antenna at the top of the building is an airplane beacon, and every night it lights up with flashing green strobes to spell out the name Pittsburgh in Morse code.
Oh, that's cool.
In case you forget where you are.
Which one are we talking about?
The hunting right there.
Across the
in
street
front
from
of the
that is an
BNY
unusual
Mellon.
looking skyscraper, like 4 silver-banded octagons all pushed together into a cluster. That is One Oxford Place, a one-stop shopping center where you can buy anything from a Rolex to a Rolls Royce. Feels like you're spending money just standing next to it.
Does sound like
If you're curious about the shape of the tower, when it was first commissioned, the owners told the architect, "We want as many corner offices as possible." The architect's solution to that geometric challenge was to build 4 octagons and slam them all together. Good job, guys. You got your corner offices. That doesn't mean the views are all necessarily that good. The newest addition to Pittsburgh's skyline is the tower at PNC Plaza, easy to spot because of its sloped roof with solar panels. Built in 2016, it is the greenest skyscraper on Earth. Thanks to the solar panels and energy-efficient design of the building, it only requires as much electricity to power it in 1 month as 2 Pittsburgh households. A far cry from our down and dirty days in the Industrial Revolution, wouldn't you say? In fact, Pittsburgh is becoming a leading city in the development of green technology, and there are a couple more landmarks that are a testament to that fact I'll be pointing out later on. In the meantime, as we cross back beneath the Smithfield Street Bridge, take a look ahead and to the right, and you'll see that there is a parking garage running along the riverbanks. That is the Monongahela Wharf, which until the 1980s was the home of the Gateway Clipper. Today it is home to the cheapest parking in all of downtown Pittsburgh. So cheap because every now and again, as you might imagine, it floods. So if you need cheap parking, you know it's there. Just maybe double check the weather forecast first, huh? Above the Bond Wharf is a row of buildings that have been restored to look as they did a century ago. Building 247 with the white facade and green roof is where George Romero made his headquarters when filming Night of the Living Dead, one of my favorite movies, and a game changer for the horror genre. In fact, all of the movie's basement scenes were filmed in 247's basement. Interestingly, George got his start in filmmaking directing shorts for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He said that the scariest thing he ever filmed was Mr. Rogers Gets a Tonsillectomy.
Oh.
For his part, Mr. Rogers recognized George as a socially conscious filmmaker and supported George's career throughout his life. No doubt you've already noticed the imposing-looking glass skyscraper with the spires on top. That is PPG Place, which stands for Pittsburgh Plate Glass. Built in the 1980s to celebrate the company's centennial anniversary, it's part of a Pittsburgh tradition that whenever companies build a corporate headquarters within the city, they ask the architect to make it out of their product. Honestly, I can think of worse marketing schemes. In this case, Pittsburgh Plate Glass was eager to show off their, well, I think it's pretty obvious, don't you? Other examples of this tradition include the Alcoa building on the banks of the Allegheny River, and the U.S. Steel Tower, which I'll be telling you more about later on in the cruise.
Oh, UPMC has red, white, and blue on.
In the meantime, coming up on either side of the boat, you will see a pair of dark, worn stone bridge piers. These are all that remain of the ill-fated Wabash Rail Bridge destroyed in the 1940s. When the bridge was torn down, the city crunched the numbers and figured out that removing the piers would be way more expensive than it was actually worth. So they just left them there in the river to become historic landmarks of the city. They are up for private sale, however, so if you have a few million extra dollars burning a hole in your pocket, consider investing in a piece of Pittsburgh history. I've been asked on more than one occasion why anybody would buy those things. What could you possibly do with them? Hypothetically, you could get away with building a house on top of them. Why? Why not? There was talk for a while of restoring the Wabash Bridge, but by the time they got around to it, downtown Pittsburgh had become so crowded there was no place to put in a connecting rail or highway. Just up ahead of us is Pittsburgh's most famous and infamous bridge, the Fort Pitt Bridge. And when I say infamous, yes, I am speaking from experience. It's a double-decker bowstring suspension design, each level with 4 one-way lanes of traffic merging into 2 one-way lanes of traffic. Combine that with the bridge being only 300 feet long and having more than 150,000 vehicles crossing it per day on average. And that math works out to the traffic on the bridge being a little bit... Now that said, while driving on the bridge might be a pain, exiting the Fort Pitt Tunnel on the left gives you one of the most breathtaking views of Pittsburgh skyline anywhere. It's a view so great, in fact, it was featured in the film The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Just past the Fort Pitt Bridge is the area of Point State Park, one of the most historically significant areas in the region, in no small part because it's where the city of Pittsburgh was originally founded, and it was the real estate over which the French and Indian War was started. There's a bit of history behind that, obviously, but we only have so much time, so I'm going to give you guys the Cliff's Notes for now. 1700s, Europeans found the point, liked it, French set up shop, English beat them up, took it off of them, set up Fort Pitt at the point, Pittsburgh was born. There, that's all the stuff that's going to be on the test. The red brick building at the rear of Point State Park is the Fort Pitt Museum, which contains historic artifacts from around the region. And it was built on the site of one of Fort Pitt's original 5 towers, or bastions, to help give you a sense of its scale. The park itself is home to a number of city-sponsored events throughout the year, including the Three Rivers Arts Festival, and until recently, the Three Rivers Regatta. The regatta was canceled in 2019 due to financial issues, but will hopefully be making a return next season. At the very end of Point State Park is the Fountain at the Point. The fountain was remodeled about a decade ago, adding in a computer system to control the height of the jets. On a clear day, they can shoot water up to 150 feet in the air. I say on a clear day because that computer also measures the wind speed. The higher the wind speed goes, the lower the jets go. That feature was added to conserve water. Before that, it was not unusual for a strong wind coming up on the rivers to blow mist and spray from the fountain all the way to the Wyndham Hotel behind Point State Park. Pittsburgh's crazy weather in action. In fact, when the fountain was dedicated in its reopening ceremony, the governor had the wind sensor turned off so that the fountain would be in its full glory. As you might expect, the wind kicked up and blew mist and spray over to the stage, soaking the governor and his assistants. If you'd like to see that, you can see it on YouTube. Right now, we're sailing on the Monongahela River and about to enter the confluence of the Three Rivers. The Monongahela begins in Fairmount, West Virginia, and flows north almost its entire length here to Pittsburgh, one of the only rivers in the world to do so. The most famous of which being the Nile. Another unusual feature of the Monongahela is that there are no islands along its entire length, which for a river this size is virtually unheard of.
That's interesting.
The Ohio River, directly in front of us, is formed by the combination of the Monongahela and Allegheny rivers. From Pittsburgh, it flows over 900 miles south to Cairo, Illinois, where it meets up with the Mississippi River, making Pittsburgh accessible from anywhere in the world via our waterways. In fact, more freight travels up and down Pittsburgh's rivers annually than the Panama Canal. The Allegheny River on the right begins in Coudersport and flows through Pennsylvania and New York until it reaches here in Pittsburgh. Unlike the other two rivers, only the first third of it can be navigated, however, as the rest is just too shallow for boats. In fact, it used to be that for most of the year, these three rivers in the colonial period were only 3 feet deep. You could only take boats up and down them in the spring when they flooded. Today, we're able to maintain a consistent depth of 16.5 feet across all three rivers through the help of the locks and dams, 9 on the Monongahela, 8 on the Allegheny, and 21 on the Ohio. Pittsburgh has an unsung fourth river as well, the Wisconsin Glacial Flow, an underground river or aquifer that flows directly beneath Point State Park and provides the North Shore with their drinking water. All three rivers were named by the Native Americans and still have their original Algonquian names. Monongahela meaning falling banks, Allegheny meaning fair waters, and Ohio meaning beautiful waters. Aside from our rivers, Pittsburgh is famous also as the city of bridges because we have more of them than anybody else at 446 currently in operation. We beat Venice, Italy to the record by 30. One of our famous bridges ahead is the Fort Duquesne Bridge. Whereas the Fort Pitt became infamous for its terrible traffic, the Fort Duquesne is famous instead for a funny story. You see, when the bridge was first commissioned, somebody made a mistake filling out the paperwork. So while the bridge did indeed get built, the highway it was supposed to connect to didn't. What followed was an embarrassing several years, as that one typo held up the production of the highway and red tape. Meanwhile, the bridge just sat there in the middle of the river the whole time, dropping off into nothing. It got to a point where locals started referring to it as the bridge to nowhere. Obviously, plenty of signs were in place to inform motorists of the danger, warn them that it wasn't safe to drive on this stretch of road, and for the most part, everybody listened. But it only takes one person. One day in the 1960s, a University of Pittsburgh student drove onto the bridge, disregarded all of the warning signs, and promptly drove right off of it. His car turned over once in the air and landed upside down in the shallows. Amazingly, though, the driver was uninjured. Oh yes, he lived through that. Kind of a mixed blessing, really, because he also got to live through years of Pittsburghers joking about how our city survived falling off the bridge to nowhere. It was even a running joke with radio DJs for a while to ask their callers, how much airtime do you think you could get off the Fort Duquesne Bridge? Never let it be said that Pittsburgh does not enjoy a darker sense of humor. On that note, a little anecdote for you. In 2011, 400 families received their annual Christmas card from a popular local comedian named Bob McCulley. On the front of the card was a picture of Bob sitting at his desk talking on the phone and saying, "I recently moved to a quiet neighborhood." The inside of the card was a picture of Allegheny Cemetery in Lawrenceville. McCulley had died the previous August. Turning our attention back to the skyline ahead of us, you'll see a set of blocky silver structures that make up Gateway Center, built during Pittsburgh's Renaissance and home to a venerable Pittsburgh institution, KDKA Broadcasting. KDKA Radio began broadcasting in 1920, making them the oldest commercial radio station in the world. KDKA TV began their first broadcast day announcing the results of the presidential election for Warren G. Harding, which, if you know your U.S. history, proved to be something of a disappointment, but there you have it. Behind Gateway Center, you'll see a skyscraper with a needle at the top. That is the Highmark building, and it too has a funny story. When it was first commissioned, the architect designed it to be the same height as the U.S. Steel Tower, Pittsburgh's tallest skyscraper. However, when construction began, the city stepped in and said, no, you can't build it that high. It's not safe. The architect was a little bit salty about that. He redesigned the top of the tower, adding the needle, trying to get as close to the original intended height as he possibly could, or at least the city would allow. For safety, he also had the needle mounted onto a spring-loaded base, so that whenever the wind blows, instead of just breaking off, the needle can move up to 3 feet in any direction. Clever idea. Would have been a much better idea if he had actually told anybody about it. Because he didn't, the first day that the Highmark building opened up, the wind started blowing, the needle started shaking, and 6 blocks of downtown Pittsburgh started evacuating. A little further upriver, you'll see a building that appears to have a giant keyhole cut out of the middle of it on the right. That is the Renaissance Hotel. At the time the building went up, there was no such thing as air conditioning. The architect settled on that design because it meant that every room would have its own windows. That way, air could flow through the building more effectively to keep everyone cool. Again, a clever idea, but if it's all the same, I'll just stick with central air. Up ahead of us, we have a trio of suspension bridges on the Allegheny that all share identical designs, so nicknamed our sister bridges. Though I find it ironic that only one of them is named after a woman. Go figure. Our first sister bridge is the Roberto Clemente Bridge, named after the famous Pittsburgh Pirate and one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Pittsburghers of a certain age remember where they were when the news of Clemente's untimely death first came in. And this bridge is one of several ways the city has chosen to honor his legacy, not only as a great athlete, but a great humanitarian. At night, the bridge is lit up with icy blue lights to reflect those of PNC Park, which I'll be telling you more about on our return trip down the river. In the meantime, take a look up at the guardrail of the Clemente Bridge and you'll see something odd. It's covered in padlocks. It's a Pittsburgh tradition that on their anniversary, couples will come out to the bridge, attach a padlock to the guardrail, and throw the key into the river as a symbol of their devotion to one another. A touching, sentimental tradition that we stole from parents. Our second sister bridge is the Andy Warhol Bridge, named for the famous top artist and filmmaker. Andy was born and raised in Pittsburgh, but didn't care as much for the city, which is why he moved to New York for his artistic career. We don't hold that against him, though. He did eventually come home. I mean, yes, it was after he died, but still. Andy's remains are interred in Pittsburgh, and at the far left end of the bridge behind the Burns White Building is the Andy Warhol Museum, the largest museum in the world dedicated to the work of a single artist. One of my favorite quotes from Andy goes like this: "I have learned that you have more power when you shut up." Now listen to me failing to live up to that advice for another 30 minutes. Our third and final sister bridge is the Rachel Carson Bridge, named for the famous environmentalist and activist. She was born and raised in Pittsburgh suburbs and did extensive research into the pesticide known as DDT. She discovered that not only was it great at killing pests, it was super good at killing off all the birds. She published her findings in a book titled Silent Spring, and thanks to her activism, DDT was eventually banned and the bird population returned to normal. Enough so, in fact, that bald eagles are once again residents of Pittsburgh. And speaking of environmental friendliness, as we cross underneath the Rachel Carson Bridge, look over to the right and you will see that we're about to pass in front of the David L. Lawrence Convention Center, one of the largest and greenest convention centers in the world. The unique slow-moving solar panels were polished by the workers putting on fleece hoodies and sliding down to get the team they wanted. I think it's a business for that job.
Hey, thanks.
And now so do you. The roof has one other surprise to it. A set of scrolling blue LED lights that spell out passages from children's books. So if you're flying over Pittsburgh tonight, you can look out the window and catch up on some light reading.
Check her into the boards.
Only one, I promise. It's a sickness. Behind the convention center, there is an intimidating brown-black skyscraper with UPMC at the top. That is the U.S. Steel Tower mentioned earlier, Pittsburgh's tallest skyscraper and part of our tradition. Build your headquarters out of your stuff. In this case, U.S. Steel is showing off their Core 10 steel line, which is specially engineered to develop a thin layer of rust on the outside to protect the inside from ever rust-safe. It's a really innovative design that has one unforeseen complication. At the time the building went up, Pittsburgh was still very polluted and experiencing an acid rain problem. Ordinarily, it takes 410 steel about 2 to 3 months to rust, but the acid rain caused the tower to rust almost literally overnight.
Yeah.
And then it started to shed. By the time the city got a protective coating on the exterior of the tower, entire blocks of downtown Pittsburgh had been blanketed with rust dust. And the city had to spend tens of thousands of dollars just on replacing the sidewalk concrete. Really goes to show that no matter how smart you think you are, nature makes fools out of everybody eventually. Hey, it was here first. Now, at this time, I'm going to be taking a short break from the microphone, but I will be available here on the third deck to answer any questions that you may have. Feel free to get up, stretch your legs, explore the boat. Grab those our drink special with the Jolly Roger, Firecracker, the Golden Angle Lemon. Jokes don't get any better from here on out, trust me, so drink up now. And I'll be back in a few minutes to tell you more about the sites along the river starting the PNC Park. See you then.
It's too hard to get up. And get out there with the chair.
Here, will you take a picture?
Sure.
Can you get up? And you grab it all
Stand up. It's just
and then
hard to wiggle on.
4 or 5 of us.
Yeah, she'll take you 5 minutes.
You're doing great.
Hey, look at you, PNC. You got a flag.
Oh, that's cool with the flag.
The other version is probably.
That's all right. I don't mind doing it.
Yeah.